Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversation podcast. My name is Patrick Ledden, and I have the honor of being your host for this podcast. Each week, I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to a senior leader to learn about their life, their work, their career, what they've learned along the way, the struggles they've overcome, and the successes they've achieved. Today is no different. I'm joined by the Senior Vice President and People Officer at Kroger. It's an amazing conversation with Tim Massa about his life, his work, and his career. The choices he made to work in Poland and what he learned from working in an international assignment, to his time at Procter Gamble and eventually working his way into Kroger. We specifically dial into the importance of culture and how leaders at every level need to understand the values and the purpose of the organization. Trust me, you're going to want to grab something to write with, sit back, prepare to take some notes as Tim and I have a C-Suite conversation. Tim Massa, welcome to C-Suite Conversations.
Patrick, good afternoon. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. You and I had a chance to chat a little bit beforehand about where you live and what you're up to these days. But folks listening to the podcast, other than the intro that I just gave and maybe your title and the organization you're at, would you tell us a little bit about Tim's career, how you got to where you are?
Well, Patrick, I, again, born and raised here in the great city of Cincinnati, Ohio. And after graduating from the University of Dayton, I went into human resources, actually before really HR was a function. I joined the Procter Gamble company in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1989, and it was really the personnel department. I worked in sales and marketing, but I was doing things that were similar to what you would find today in any HR function or team across America or across the globe. Things like recruiting, training, I actually even traded company cars. I would work with dealers for company cars for our salespeople, office buildings. So a bit of an operations role as well, a facilities role, as well as a personnel role. And then over time, 4 or 5 years in with P&G, I had 21 years with Procter Gamble. The function started to come in its own. And I started to cut my teeth really in the employee relations area. And I found that there was two sides to every story when it comes to an employee relations matter, whether it was between an employee and their supervisor. And when there was a performance issue or a grievance or not seeing eye to eye on expectations, being able to be the connector to really hear the employee side as well as the leader side. I really honed in on listening for understanding. And that led to really working with leaders on areas like succession planning and ensuring that do we have the right person in the right role at the right time. And I had various roles throughout P&G that I was always supporting the business and felt I was more of a sales or merchandiser or marketer, but I was doing it on the people lens and ensuring that we had the right talent and that we were developing the right capabilities or training programs to support what the particular business unit that I was working on come to life. And, I all along, I always enjoyed the fact that being a connector. I think it's, if you look at my Myers-Briggs or Strength Finder strength, it's connecting others. And I've always used that as a strength that sometimes my chairman and CEO, Rodney, says that's your superpower. You're a connector. You're a collaborator. And I think I've been able to drive that throughout 21 years of Procter & Gamble. I moved 9 times. The acronym for Procter & Gamble was Pack and Go back then. And we moved a lot during 21 years with them all across the U.S. in various roles, a lot of global assignments. Had a chance to live in Warsaw, Poland, with my beautiful wife, Lisa. We have 2 daughters, Mallory and Morgan. They were 7 and 9 at the time when we moved to Poland. And I had all of Central Europe. It was called Central Europe. And I had a lot of the former Russian bloc of Estonia and Latvia and areas that I was responsible for based out of Warsaw. And that was a tremendous experience for us. And again, it was really where I started to learn more about the people strategy to support the business. And we had a lot of global teams there in technology and finance and back office that I was able to help lead. A key piece out of that assignment, Patrick, was my scorecard for success was finding a local leader in Poland to take over the business. I was an expatriate at the time, and it really honed in on me the importance of, are you developing the next generation of talent? Not only are you helping others develop their talent, but in your own world, how are you doing that? And that assignment was a crucible assignment there. When I came back to Cincinnati, I was again running global sales and marketing and working with, again, a lot of key leaders. P&G wanted me to move for the 10th time to Singapore. And at that time, those two young girls one was going into high school, and I'm the youngest of five, growing up in a very Midwestern, middle of the road, middle income family, didn't have a lot. And I had great upbringing, and my parents were 89 and were in failing health. And the thought of going to Singapore with that going on, as well as all the moves that I did with my daughters, I promised them I wouldn't move them in high school. So I made the choice not to do the Singapore. I still had aspirations, though, Patrick, to be a people officer and to lead the people function for a major company. And not that I wasn't in consideration at P&G for that, but I also knew that I was maybe slowing down my chances by not doing that next assignment in Singapore, because it was a key opportunity. So I chose to not do that, and one thing led to another. And my former officer that I used to work for at P&G was very close in terms of a business partner with the CEO at the time of Kroger, a gentleman by the name of Dave Dillon. And Mr. Dillon was trying to recreate and establish a people function at Kroger. It was very much more of an administrative function at the time, more policy-based, firefighter, not necessarily someone that was at the table, really looking at what's the people capabilities and talent that we need to drive the business priorities now and into the future. So Dave Dillon knew that he needed to upgrade and really transform the people function. And he went out and hired who I believe is the most premier people champion in the industry at the time, and that was Katie Barkley, who was at General Motors for many years, worked under Rick Wagner and other leaders at GM. And Katie actually turned down a job at Coca-Cola to come work for Kroger because she was impressed with Dave Dillon's vision. And he knew that there were a ton of leaders with a lot of seniority that were likely going to be retiring, and this next generation of talent, but that talent pipeline wasn't as strong as it needed to be for a company of Kroger size. So Katie came in, and Katie was also connected with my former officer at P&G, and he was nearing retirement. And Katie said, "Hey, I'll give you 5 years, but I need to find a successor, and I don't see a successor at Kroger." And that's where, again, my former leader at P&G, Dick Antoine, told me, "Hey, I'd never want to see you go." I had spent 21 years with Procter Gamble, but this is an avenue that you might be a perfect fit to work for Katie and work for the Kroger company right here in your backyard, no relocation. And, if you, no promises, but I came in as the head of talent. So I had all of recruiting and training, succession, performance management. And I worked for Katie for 4.5 years, and true to her word, she retired. And I just celebrated my 14th year with Kroger, and I've now been in this top chair as the chief people officer for the past 10. And actually, my current chairman and CEO, Rodney McMullen, who succeeded Dave Dillon, when he became the chairman and CEO, I became his people leader. So we've been together now for 10 years, and we built and stood on the shoulders of what Katie and Dave started in this people transformation. And over time, I've been able to add the labor relations function to my remit, our whole internal and external communications, what we call corporate affairs, government affairs, under my responsibility. All of our shared services and back office is linked to me today. And then one of the funnest parts of my job is we do have a company aviation team, and we look at that as company planes that fly our key leaders around. We have 2,700 stores in 35 states in the District of Columbia. So we 420,000 people. So we utilize our aircraft very effectively and efficiently, and that aviation team reports to me. And one of our key values is safety, and the safety of our leaders and our folks that we get from point A to point B. So it's kind of fun to have the aviation team be linked in as well. So that's a little of a quick history, and I 35 years now from starting out in Charlotte, North Carolina, right out of Dayton to being back here and back home, and really helping drive one of the great American companies that's in business today.
Oh, what a wonderful journey. I was actually reading through your various components of your roles, the things you have stewardship over. And just like you said, I was like retention, engagement, corporate affairs, associate communications, shared services, and that said, and aviation. And I was like, wait a minute, I got to ask about that. So what do you do in the role around aviation?
Well, look, we've got a handful of pilots and mechanics, and my role is to ensure that just like any department, what's their purpose? Their purpose is getting our leaders in a safe manner from one location to the next. Obviously, from a capital investment, I work with our head of aviation on ensuring that we've got the safest planes, that we're maintaining the high quality of their aircraft, and we're utilizing that to our best advantage on driving our business. And it's an integral part of helping us get to all of our locations that are, again, spread out throughout most of the U.S.
No, that makes perfect sense. I just bet
how we do it in the most efficient and effective way.
No, that makes sense. I just bet when you were kind of growing up and cutting your teeth and getting into the work world, you never thought I was going to have stewardship over essentially a little airline. That's pretty wild. As you went through, Tim, and you talked about your career, first of all, congratulations on such a great career and 14 years at Kroger. That's amazing. I had a few things I want to ask you about that I think will be helpful for the listeners to just get your perspective on.
Sure.
One of those first pieces was really about taking the role in Poland. You said you went to Poland and you were an expat working there. And I'm sure there's people who are listening to this that either they've had these opportunities or they're kind of have an opportunity right now to do this, or maybe they aspire to do that. I'd just love to hear from your perspective, kind of the pros and cons, both from a personal and family side and the development there, but also the business, kind of working on the international side, what that's taught you.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when they first, I actually had an opportunity initially to go to an area in Russia called Novomoskovic. And I remember meeting with the leader in a Delta Crown room 3 years prior to the Poland opportunity coming up. And I never, I didn't even know where Novomoskovic, Russia was. And I was a bit anxious on the climate and would my family be, able to, adapt to that kind of environment. And at the time, the operation that P&G had there, the organization owned a lot of other businesses that were not in line with Procter's portfolio. We had a plastics business. We had they owned a athletic team that was a men's basketball team. And a lot of the work was and a few other entities, and a lot of the work was going to be come in and cut that all, remove all of that and do a lot of org downsizing. And I remember meeting the leader, and he took one look at me and learned more about my profile and my what I believed in, et cetera. And he says, "This is not going to be for you and a young family. This is going to be a tough job. There are security concerns, et cetera." And it was one where be careful what you sign up for, and make sure that you're actually looking at all aspects and not just jumping at the opportunity in front of you. And as much as I felt I could handle it, I was more concerned about would my family be happy. And actually, it was the leader who said, "I don't think this is a good idea for you." And I'll never forget that, because as disappointed as I was at the time, he was looking out for me.
Yeah.
And I've carried that insight and that learning in every exchange I do with associates when I talk about their career path or opportunities. And my goodness, moving 9 times, I am a product of, I think you benefit from seeing different things. Now, today's environment, relocating is a lot tougher. And actually, we have more technology today where you may not need to do that as often. But at the time, I felt like I lost that opportunity. And actually, he was doing me a favor by encouraging me not to take that. So then 3 years later, when the Poland opportunity came, again, didn't know a whole lot about Warsaw, Poland, but it was a whole different experience. I was going with a general manager from Italy who was an aspiring high potential. It was his first country assignment. The finance person was from Mexico, and he too was his first assignment. And then it was also somebody from America that was going to lead sales and marketing, and then myself leading the people function. So all four of us went over at the same time. And again, our scorecard for success was you need to develop the local organization, and you need to have them see how they can run on their own without help from an expatriate. So the opportunity was, wow, I can take Procter & Gamble's insights, our philosophy, and translate that locally. And one of the neatest things we did, Patrick, was, again, this was Poland, who was under communist rule. Many of our workforce were first generation in a workforce. They grew up under communism with their parents and grandparents, and in Poland, many generations lived together in the same residence. So these were first generation workers, but they were skeptical, and they were skeptical of corporations like we weren't being transparent, or they were we weren't being on the up and up on the opportunities that we were affording them. So one of the things we learned, my first day on the job, I stood up in front of my team that were all local Polish employees, talking about my vision, my background, and a very young professional raised her hand, Kasia. I'll never forget Kasia. And she said, "Why are you standing? Why are you using your hands? You must not have anything important to say." And you talk about taking the wind out of your sail. And her point was, they were very self-confident. They were wanting to understand where you were coming from, but again, you needed to really get into their skin, into their eyes. And the stuff we were preaching, we needed to step back and make sure that when we're talking about our values or our purpose, they needed to feel like it was their purpose and their values. So we actually, my general manager and I, we rewrote our purpose and our values to fit their language, to fit their adoption. And, we would say, we collaborate collectively, and we collaborate. Instead, it would be, they called it one team, same dream. So we would find ways that they could articulate what we were trying to profess, but it was in their words, and it felt they could try it on and make it their own. And I use that example because that was a 3-year experience where everything we were doing, we needed to step back and listen for understanding and put it in their terms for them to be able to carry the baton and take it to the next level. I learned a ton about humility. I learned a ton about patience. I learned a ton about listening for understanding and then coaching situationally. And by the end, it was, I had created a following. And to this day, almost 20 years later now, I left in 2006. Almost 20 years later now, I'm still connected with hundreds of these leaders on LinkedIn and through other means on how they're doing and how they're growing. And they became an advocate. I became an advocate and ambassador, and they became great followers. So that experience professionally, I always go back on any situation that's uncomfortable, or I don't have the answer, I don't have a playbook. I remember the time in Poland where we were walking in eyes wide open and having an organization just looking at us and not necessarily being inspired until we took the time to invest in them and make it their own. Personally,
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
No, I was going to say personally, for Lisa and my two daughters, it was an incredible opportunity to see the world. We saw parts of the world, whether it was Thailand or China or obviously Italy and France and Germany. I mean, those were like day trips from Cincinnati to Cleveland or to Atlanta. I mean, we saw the world. Our girls went to an American school. To this day, both my daughters, 7 and 9, now 30 and 28, still have some of their best connections are in weddings, celebrate family editions with school children they met when they were 7 and 9, and that's life changing. And I'll forever be indebted to that experience and what that's done for us personally.
That's such a great story. And I appreciate you taking the time to share that, because there is so much to benefit, right, from being literally in a place that you didn't grow up in, you're not familiar with, working with people with different,
Right.
Different culture, different customs, and also that humility component that has to play out when you realize you think you know something and then you don't, and also that
Yeah.
that ambiguity where you don't know exactly how it's
Yes.
going to play out, or even if you're invited to someone's house when you're living there and just some celebration that you just
Oh my
don't do as a
goodness.
normal custom. It's all the what's going to happen, how's this going to play out. It's such a wonderful story.
You talk about the house. We would have the team over, and I grew up again in a youngest of five, but a large extended family, and we would always come together for the holidays, and we would do that at our house for this team of about 65 people, I think, at the time, that were linked into me. And one of the big things in Poland is you travel, you have house shoes. So when you travel, you have travel shoes, and then you change your shoes and put on house shoes out of respect for the host. And I remember the foyer of our house, it looked like, just a gymnasium of shoes. And everybody changing their shoes was shocking to me. And they would have 9 and 10 course meals that, they would eat throughout the night, and then they wouldn't leave. And at 2 a.m, they would bring out more food. And, we were trying to follow their traditions. So we learned a tremendous amount of customs and traditions, and really, the experience I had in Poland in every location with my family is you had to bloom where you were planted and lean in. Not everything's going to go exactly how you expected it to go, but the more you can lean in on the front of your toes versus the back of your heels. And if you're looking at a calendar, I remember this because my finance colleague, when we all went over, Jack had one of those big calendars, like you'd have on your desk. And every day, Jack would take a red marker and he would X through the day. And he's like, I'm counting down my assignment. It really was a glass half empty. And we worked right across from each other. So we would stare at each other, and it was almost you knew when he was going to do it. You knew the time of day he was going to do it. You could picture myself in that office setting right now. And it was such a miss. And because he wasn't giving his best, and it came off, and he was going through the motions, and actually he was the last to leave because he didn't have anybody ready on the timing the rest of us had ready to take over. Eventually did, but back to whatever experience you're given, whether it's in your own backyard or whether it is a relocation or you're moving to a new company, I think it's always important to maximize the experience and get the most out of it. And also, in that situation, you are receiving a lot, but it's as much about giving. I think I work for a terrific leader in Rodney McMullen, our chairman and CEO, and he always talks about if you help somebody else have a good day, then in turn you have a great day. And I think again about putting others first and leaning in to a situation where it is ambiguous, but you're going to learn something. Even if you skin your knee, you get back up and you keep trying. That's the most important piece I've learned.
Absolutely. It's interesting, as you were talking about that, I was reminded of a project I was recently doing before I left Vanderbilt for the last couple of years. I was studying disruption and how when disruption hits you in your life in big ways or small ways, there's often that kind of pause in what should you do, trying to make a decision, trying to discern, as we would say, what you're going to do in that moment. And as you talk about the trip potential opportunity in Singapore, Poland, and Russia, each of those moments are disruptive moments. Like this is a disruptive moment in your career, it caused you to pause. There's a new opportunity. It's exciting, but it's still disruptive. And you have to discern what you're going to do in that moment. And when you talked about the Russia one specifically, you talked about the voice of another person giving you counsel. And as you were saying that, I was reminded of a quote I read from you where you said about your associates at Kroger. You said you think about their well-being holistically. You know that our teams thrive when they are fulfilled emotionally, physically, and financially, as well as in their career and in their community. And it sounds like that type of counsel that person was giving you at that moment. Just from a practical perspective, when you think about holistically an associate, what does that kind of look like at the practical level? If I'm one of the leaders in the organization, how do I think about my people holistically?
That's a great question. And that gentleman back on the Russia piece was ahead of his time. Because what we try to do is from a people function standpoint, I partner with our leadership, and all of my HR business partners are partners with our leaders in helping our leaders embrace and own the people priorities. They're not HR priorities. And I think that's the difference between a good and a great people champion. If you're just, deploying initiatives that are HR led, it's only going to be so effective. The real catalyst and the magic is getting the leader of any organization to buy in to making people. It really is the greatest asset. It sounds cliche, but we look at 4 main pillars that we look for every leader to drive from a people standpoint. Number 1 is every leader needs to champion talent. You have to attract, you got to help with recruiting, you got to help develop and grow talent. And obviously you have to help retain talent. And in today's, especially in the retail, the more we can retain talent, that's a knowledgeable worker that's helping a customer have a better experience in our stores or online. So talent at every level, that leader owns that, and we help enable it. We also have a pillar called how are we developing effective leaders? Leaders that are trusted, are credible and capable to be at that level, and that they're both importers of talent and they're exporters of talent. That the talent, it's not your talent in your line of business, it's the company's talent, and how are we best leveraging them? So we do a lot to teach. The role of a leader is I got to be a highly effective leader, but I got to do that through helping talent grow. The other piece, and you mentioned this on the well-being, is we need to advocate for every associate and their well-being. And we do take well-being, to your point, Patrick, to a much more holistic view, not only the mental toll and emotional toll that so many of us across industries are dealing with in today's society, but also, we, for the first time about a year ago, we partnered with Goldman Sachs in a part of their company called ACO. And again, we're over 420,000 people, 90% are hourly workers. And over half of those workers are part-time. We offered financial education to every associate. We were the first company to do that at retail at an hourly level. It wasn't a financial planner. It was helping them understand how to save money, how to build a budget, how to plan for college for their dependents, how to buy their first home, et cetera. And that was an investment in their well-being, that financially helping them see that, I started out as a courtesy clerk or a cashier, but now I'm an assistant store manager or a store leader or a district manager, and you continue to grow and develop and help them see the power of coming for a job, we like to say, and discovering what's possible in their career. And then finally, it's really how are we creating a culture that's high performance and that is values driven and that is, people stick around because we step up and we're there when nobody's watching and we're there when you need us the most. I think we're over 140 years old, and I think from Barney Kroger when he first started the store, down the street here, making bread, and picking out the groceries for the customers that came into his store. How amazing is it 140 plus years later that we're delivering on people's doorstep, we're delivering online, and you're picking it up in the store, and then you're having an experience in our four walls. We're an operations company, and when there's a tragedy or a natural disaster, and the hurricanes that just hit in the Carolinas, for example, in Florida, our banner Harris Teeter was the first one on the scene to help those North Carolinians to get back up. Many times, a customer's first step out after they lose a loved one is our grocery store, because it's a place that's familiar. It's we call our employees associates, and they know the customer. And so, as big as we are, we had a former executive that's retired now say we're the biggest little company in America, because the culture is it can feel as close as your best friend while we have the scale that we have. And I think we try to drive that in every leader of others, that every associate matters. When I joined, both my parents that lived that long life died within 68 days of each other. I'd only been here a few years, and I was starting to know people, but I didn't have the 21-year history I had at Procter Gamble. 2/3 of that church were filled with Kroger people, many of which I didn't know, but that showed up to offer support. It's an example of the culture, and it's hard to articulate that when you're recruiting someone of like, hey, we're going to be there when you need us. But I find time and time again, and there's something special about it. And when you think of what we've gone through with the pandemic, the unsettling and unthinkable tragedies that went on with George Floyd. I mean, we sat here in sessions like this, Patrick and myself, Rodney, my chairman, other white leaders sat and listened to black associates on a Brady Bunch TV screen coming at us with their story, what they went through when they got pulled over, what they went through when they were running through a neighborhood. And it changed us. And we came back with, we need to advocate for every associate and also for their well-being. But we need to be a beacon for everyone, that everyone can be their authentic, genuine self and be successful here. And that's not that we weren't doing that before then, but that was just in a moment where I believe when we have crises, this company, like none other, really steps up and rises to the occasion. We've had, unfortunately, mass shootings. We had a mass shooting in Boulder, Colorado, in our King Soopers store. And the first person to call us within hours of that happening was the CEO of Walmart. And Doug McMillan called Rodney and said, there is no competition in tragedy. And he gave us his team that worked on a similar incident they had in New Mexico. And there's no playbook for these things. And we took it a very unfortunate situation. And now we have paid that forward as other companies have faced this tragedy and this unsettling, senseless acts. And we've been able to pay it forward to other companies. And I look at that as our leaders doing the right thing. And we always say, you really can be your authentic self here, and we're going to really help you be all you can be. Now, at the same time, we recognize you may not be a fit. Uh, the role may not be a perfect match for you. And if we can't find something for you, then how do we, in a respectful way, out of care and concern, we want you to be a customer for life. How do we help you move on to find something else? It's built within our values, and I believe our people priorities. The more we can have leaders own that and bring it to life, I think they see the impact they can have versus, let somebody else handle that. That's not. We really try to avoid at all costs that approach.
We have at Franklin Covey, one of the things we focus on doing with organizations is help them to build a high trust winning culture. And we often talk about
yes,
culture is developed deliberately. It's leader led. Great cultures have
yes.
their own language, and they have a framework
Yep.
or way of kind of structuring things when they approach it. I would imagine that there's people
Right.
who we partner with, or people who are listening to this podcast right now who are in the C-suite saying, "Yeah, we had a great culture, but then we grew." And how do you?
Right.
If I were to ask you, like, Tim, what's the essential element in your mind? Like, how do you have a great culture at scale when you are decentralized? When when the reality is that many people, the store manager where they work at, that's the whole company to them. I mean, how do you build it at scale?
Well, it is a great question, especially with such a large dispersed workforce. I think it's always important to step back, and we have 5 generations in the workforce today, and whether you've been here 40 years or you've been here 4 days, one thing that is constant is we talk about our purpose. Our purpose is to feed the human spirit. And that's a very lofty word. You want to feed the human spirit. Well, every day, any meeting that you have across the company in any location, we start with what's called an uplift. And what we mean by that is tell a story within the team or a customer exchange where we made someone's day brighter. We uplifted them. We lifted their spirit. And we talk about feed because we are in the food business. We want to, when you think of food, we want you to think of Kroger. So whether you're 4 days or 40 years, we're consistently bringing back and putting in front the purpose. We also talk about our values. We're very values driven. And that is not something that's just a poster on a wall or a training that you go through and forget. We really try to continue to contemporize and renew the emphasis of our values and teach that throughout the day and throughout the work and in the environment on an ongoing basis. I believe those 2 foundations of purpose and values brings everybody along on this is what's expected at Kroger, whether you've been here 30, 40 years or you've been here 1 to 2 years. We need to continue to adapt and pivot based on insight that we get across our generations. Just like we used to be, everybody was in an office, and then all we're dealing with right now in terms of what's the right balance of in-person and hybrid and remote. And look at this median. I mean, March 13th of 2020, now obviously we're an essential business and we kept open during COVID, but our buildings, we have 50 buildings across the US. We sent everybody home on March 13th, 2020, and we used Teams. I had never used Teams before. We had a couple departments that were using it, and we had no idea what it was. And we held our breath and if it was going to work when everybody went home, and it worked. And we've learned a lot about that. But we also recognize it all can't be a remote setting. Yeah. And I think it's just the ability to stay true to your purpose and your values, and how you connect that back to business decisions, to making priority calls, to why we took the harder left and the easier right on a decision, linking it back through storytelling. We like you have with Ty and Travis and folks there. We do a lot in storytelling, and we leverage a lot through our enterprise, and we learn from we have, it's the Kroger company, and we call it our family of banners. We have over 24 banner names based upon where you live. It may be a Kroger banner like Patrick, you are in Nashville, or it may be a Smith's brand in Utah, or a Fry's brand in Arizona, or a Pick and Save in Wisconsin. They're all still part of the Kroger family. And we do a lot to try to connect back to purpose and values so that we don't lose the essence of what we're about.
As you were going through that, Tim, I'm like, this is a master class that I think leaders should really listen to in regard to how do you create that culture at scale, because it goes back to the central things of purpose and values and how those values are lived out. Because if you think about any business, and certainly Kroger, like you said, I have around here, I told you on the front end, there's probably a handful of Krogers within 5 miles of my house. And every one of those Kroger stores have been dealt a different strategic hand. So one's maybe on a better corner. One might have newer facility.
Right.
But at the end of the day, all of them have people in that store. And the question becomes,
That's right.
how are those people representing the brand to people like me when I walk in the door? And that's so critical.
Right.
And sometimes we overlook the value of that until all of a sudden it becomes a problem and it's too late. So I recently read about how we oftentimes don't think about culture. It doesn't hit the boardroom until it's a problem or a crisis. And I love how you're talking about it. It's like, no, we think about this every day.
Every day. And we think about it every store. You're in a microcosm there, Patrick, with 4 or 5 stores that you can get to pretty quickly. The smell of the place starts with the store leader and his or her team. And you can tell based on, is the associate friendly? Are they greeting you? Are we in stock? Are they walking you to the aisle? Are they asking about your day? Or are they saying, Patrick doesn't want me to violate his space and wants me to give him room. He doesn't want to talk to anybody today. It really ebbs and flows on the store leader. So back to those pillars, that effective store leader sets the tone. The walls are there. We're going to scale our supply chain and we're going to have our brand products, et cetera, but they got to bring the experience to life. And one of the things we're learning right now is that our leaders really are experience makers. And we're trying to teach every leader of others in that store, in a warehouse, delivering our product, the drivers that if you do our delivery business, they're an experience maker. They're someone in a uniform that's bringing both perishable and non-perishable goods to your door in a professional way. We expect that. But they have an opportunity every day for every customer to make or break that experience and hope that you come back again. And you're right. We have them in different, we work hard to mirror the communities in which we serve and really try to cater to that in the best possible way.
Well, Tim, I am uplifted. You said you start your meetings with uplift moments, and I hope that people found this podcast uplifting. I really enjoyed learning about your career, some of the decisions you made, and specifically about this as we went into this last piece about the importance of culture and really leaders at every level. Tim, I wish you all the best. Thanks for joining us today in C-Suite Conversations.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Really enjoyed our time together. You're an awesome facilitator. Thank you.
Well, folks, that's all I have for today's episode. Big thanks to Tim Massa from Kroger for joining me today to talk about his work and his life, what he's learned along the way, and especially that conversation about culture. I hope you all take it to heart, especially me. Understanding the purpose of your organization, the values of your organization, and how to live those out every day is so critical, not just to yourself or your team, but to your entire organization. That's all I have for today. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is Dr. Patrick Ledden. Now go make it a great day.